Today, we will be reviewing the Executor AI Ultra MT5 Expert Advisor by Mr. Andrei Vlasov. Stick around to the end to see if this is a legitimate expert advisor or just another MQL5 scam. So we can start off here on the sales page to get an idea of how this bot works. And really the developer here is speaking a lot about its AI capabilities. Specifically, if we go through the description, he's mentioning deep Q learning and time delay neural networks, and as well as a proprietary UltraX component. So Q learning is a type of reinforcement learning, similar to how they would, for instance, train a self-driving car. And neural nets are a very popular type of machine learning family of models, which essentially work by mimicking how a brain would work. And then UltraX supposedly is something which he has trained here too. And he's mentioning, which is quite interesting, that all of these AI bots are hosted locally. So like it's saying, for instance, they don't use systems like GPT and they do not require external API calls. And essentially all of the models are running on the desktop. And this is definitely possible. Like personally at Prosperity Algo, we also make lots of AI-enabled expert advisors, and I have found that it's usually much easier and more effective to host the models locally, as then you don't need to constantly make API calls, and the GPT LLM type models are sometimes not the most effective for predicting price relative to more simple locally hosted networks. So here, these are the AI models which he's mentioning this bot uses, so we can effectively keep an eye out for that. To kind of scroll down a bit further, the author here is mentioning some of the benefits of locally hosted models versus APIs. And I would generally speaking agree with this. Like you don't need to use a REST API, so you simplify a lot of more complications like having to buy API keys or having to pay for tokens, all of which can get a bit complicated. So I would be generally speaking be in agreement there. And then here we kind of speak a little bit more to how the actual strategy works. And it's mentioning that each trade is secured with a stop loss, which is typically a good thing to see. And he's also mentioning that no grid or martingale or high risk approaches are being used here either, which depending on your risk preferences could be something which you're also interested in. And if we flip through the different pages here, we can see that it doesn't give us a ton of information about how like the bot decides to enter trades. It's using a lot of fancy AI words, but usually even if you have an AI model, like you need to also have some sort of trigger or filter in order to actually enter the market. Like how training AI models work, as somebody who's trained AI models, is you need to usually train them on some sort of setup. So it's very rare that you can predict every single bar or you can predict every single tick because there's too much randomness and the models don't typically perform well if you do that. What I have found works best is usually you want to isolate your setups or isolate your trades, which you would have taken under a more traditional trading strategy, and then train your AI model on those setups. That tends to work quite well, but I'm not quite sure what approach he's using here. Now we can go check out the two live signals posted, as well as kind of another page here which explores how the AI model was trained. And here, looking at the two signals, this would be the aggressive one. We're seeing very high percentage returns to date of 283% in November. But what I would really keep in mind is this was using extremely high amounts of leverage. This would be akin to an account flip. So the gentleman deposited $200 and made a handful of trades to turn that into 566. This is extremely high risk, right? And especially if you couple this with the fact that the deposit was super low, there's a good chance, or he may have been running multiple signals and simply picking the best ones. Like it's not particularly hard to have a run of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 positive trades in a row, particularly if you were to use an enormous stop loss. Like gold has been trending fairly bullishly the past week or so you would have technically been able to just take a bunch of long trades knowing that we're in a bullish uptrend or kind of a bullish pullback and you would have effectively been profitable without needing to have a particularly good system or even a system with an edge. So this few trades with this high leverage is something just to be a bit apprehensive about, and it would definitely be better to see some more trades. But that doesn't mean that this is a bad system. It just means that there's a bit of marketing going on here and something to just kind of keep in mind. We can flip over to the second signal and it exhibits very similar properties. Here the deposit was a bit larger and the leverage used is a bit less, so the returns will therefore be a little bit less high. And now finally we can jump over here to where he explains the actual AI model training process. And what I found very interesting is that he actually is not speaking to like the neural networks and the Q-learning which he spoke to earlier, but he does seem to know how you would train a random forest model. And what's quite interesting is that random forests are a phenomenal type of model for trading in general. Like if he's actually using a random forest classifier, lots of the models we use are also random forest classifiers. This is actually probably one of the best models which you can use for trading. So what this gentleman is doing is that he's training it on open, high, low, close data, and he's also using a classic train test split. He is making a few mistakes here, or at least in the wherever he got this code from, there are a few mistakes. Like using kind of the automatic train test split function usually isn't great if you're using like time series data, which is annotated by time. So this is a pretty flawed approach for anything in the financial world, but this is kind of like random forest training 101. So he is using a lot of estimators. In best practice, he should probably limit the depth here too, because this is going to be a pretty in-depth model. Like usually if you're training any sort of AI model for trading, you want to usually limit how deep it can go to avoid overfitting, but this is way too detailed for the purposes of this video, so I won't go into too much detail. But one other thing to point out here is here he's saying that like, hey, we're able to effectively save it using Pickle, which means that he would need to effectively read it with a Python script. And then what he's saying is that he's calling the Python script from MQL5. So all of this, if being done properly, could actually be quite an interesting approach. So when I've personally trained random forest models in MQL5, I've always used the ONNX format, where I essentially export the model from Python and then read it in MQL5 in a converted format. Here he appears to be using a bit of a different method of doing so, with a kind of using a Python script essentially called from the terminal. Could perhaps work. I'm less familiar with it, but at least he does seem to be reasonably familiar with how to actually use AI for trading. So I don't think this is exactly perfect, but from a high-level illustrative point, he does seem to have a lot more knowledge in how this stuff actually works than the vast majority of MQL5 sellers. So I was actually very impressed by this sales page. And it does show that the author does understand how to actually use AI for trading, which is quite neat. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's being used perfectly in the model, etc. But he does have a pretty good knowledge. So now we can hop over here into the MetaTrader 5 backtester, where I've taken the liberty of already downloading this bot and running a quick backtest. And as you guys can see here, like this is clearly a very manipulated backtest, right? It's turning $10,000 into $4.5 million over the span of a year. It literally only lost one trade over the entire period. And yeah, like there's clearly something going on. Like this is way too good to be true, and it's impossible. You can't have these kinds of results with trading, or else we would all have 10,000 Lamborghinis. So there is either a significant degree of manipulation here, or it's using a history reader, but the backtest is definitely fishy. What I've come to realize is that although the backtest might be total hogwash, perhaps there actually is a real strategy behind the live signal, but unfortunately we are simply unable to assess if there's anything legitimate here, because this backtest is clearly fake. So let's maybe run a quick visual backtest, just to see if we can glean a little bit more information about how it might work. And although it might look a little bit too good to be true, perhaps there's a little bit of an indication of how it would work. Okay, so we're seeing it run. It has some cool visuals. So it appears to be more of a trend following system so far, where effectively it's going along with the trend. Let's wait to see if it takes more of a short trade anytime soon. Yeah. It's taking its time. Oh. I will quickly minimize it to see if it goes a bit faster. And we can pop it back open. Oh, there we go. Yeah, I took a trade. I took a short as well. Okay, interesting. So yes, it's not necessarily only following a trend following system. It is taking trend following long trades here, but it's also taking shorts, which are mean reverting trades. I find this is usually a pretty good characteristic of a manipulated backtest, because if it's seemingly switching between longs and shorts without having too much rhyme or reason behind it, that's not usually an awesome sign. So yes, this matches my hypothesis that there might be a strategy here. It seems to be spacing out the trades at least, but it's tough to discern it because there is such a significant degree of manipulation going on. So I can maybe stop that here and kind of conclude that from what I've seen, this author understands how random forest models look. So perhaps he actually is using some AI for the live trading, but the backtest, both the visual and the full backtest, are clearly manipulated, either using a history reader or something to fake it, because 10 grand to 4.5 million is simply impossible. Therefore, I would keep watching the live signals to see if this bot lasts, but I'd be very hesitant to just buy it today, simply because we can't accurately backtest it. So thank you guys very much, and stick around for the following short clip to receive a free EA from us. Before you click away, if you're looking to get a real expert advisor, here at Prosperity Algo Solutions, we're currently offering our Golden Time Bomb system based on automating the London breakout and opening range breakout 100% for free. Watch the pinned video to find out more and to get access.